Welcome to Local Heroes here on WKFK TV 7, where we interview veterans of the military and we preserve their stories, unedited and unchanged. So join us now for Local Heroes. Hello and welcome to Local Heroes here on WKFK TV 7 and coming to you from the GI Museum in Goshen, Mississippi. Tonight we're continuing with Hal and Travis Creel on Local Heroes. Travis, tell us about how you got to Vietnam. I understand it was a pretty long and interesting trip.
Yes, it was. It was very interesting, and to this day, I have never found anyone else that went over to Vietnam the same way I went there. Back in 1965, I was at Fort Benning, Georgia, and the company commander got all of the troops out in the yard under a big old oak tree, and I won't ever forget this as long as I live, but they set up a TV out there, and President Johnson got on there and on TV, and he declared war in Vietnam. And he said the unit he was sending was the 1st Air Cavalry Division, which was where I was at Fort Benning. So we had 2 weeks to get ready to go to Vietnam, and we had to pack up all of our stuff, all of our weapons, everything that was going to be issued to us during those 2 weeks. We left Columbus, Georgia in 2 weeks, and we convoyed from Columbus to Savannah, Georgia. Well, the military, the U.S. government had got these merchant marine vessels that they put us on. They put 3,000 of us on one ship, and there was just barely enough room to breathe and sleep on there, and much less have any room to move around and have any fun and go socialize with your buddies or whatever. But anyway, we left Savannah, Georgia, and went through the Gulf of Mexico, through the Panama Canal, which here I am seeing the world. Okay, that's what I wanted to do when I joined the military, was see the sights of the world. So we went through the Panama Canal, got a good tour of that, and from there we went out in the Pacific Ocean, and we were on that ship 15 days, and our first fuel stop was in Honolulu, Hawaii, which I got to see Honolulu. Well, they let us off the ship at 9 o'clock in the morning and told us that 9 o'clock that night was curfew. Well, at 10 o'clock the next morning, the Honolulu Police Department was still hauling the troops back to the ships because they were out partying. We were down on Waikiki Beach, you know, in our uniforms. And anyway, we finally got everybody back on board, and we headed across to Guam. We stopped in Guam about 15 days later or so. The whole trip took 33 days. And you can imagine troops getting sick. There's always somebody all 24 hours a day hanging over the side of the ship, you know, regurgitating. So, but anyway, when we got to Guam, we picked up some more fuel, and they wouldn't let us go into town like they did in Honolulu. So the Navy brought big ice coolers full of beer down to the docks, and we sat there and drank beer on the dock while they fueled the ship. Well, after they did that, we got on the ship and we hit the South China Sea, and that's when we started drawing combat pay. 2 submarines picked us up and escorted us across the South China Sea, and you could see the periscopes sticking up on each side of the ship as we were being escorted across to our dock. We docked in Quinyon. There was not a port there. It was just a beach. We docked offshore, and the next morning they sent amphibs out there to pick us up, and it kind of reminded me of Normandy invasion. I mean, they picked us up, put us in the amphibs, went up to the beach, let the tailgate down, and we all went out with our duffel bags and sat down on the beach. And we waited there almost all day, and all of a sudden, here come a trail of Chinook helicopters coming from up in the mountains where they were going to put us down. and they hauled us like 20 at a time plus our duffel bags. Took us up to a place called Ankh, which was up in the mountains, and they set us down at the base of a mountain called Hong Kong Mountain. They had the top of the mountain, that Hong Kong Mountain, cut off, and had a radio relay set up there where we could communicate to whoever. And our division commander told us when we got there that we had 30 days to set up base camp, and then we were going to war. So during that 30 days, we had set up GP tents and mess tents and troop tents and cut trees, and we kill rats and snakes and just whatever come along. And we after 30 days, that's whenever they started going out on patrol and stuff. So, like I said, it took 33 days for us to get there. And to this day, I have not found anybody else. I probably hadn't run into anybody, had the opportunity to meet anybody that was on one of the troop ships. Everybody else, like Hal here, you know, they were lucky enough to get to fly over there, you know. And but anyway, I spent 11 months and 8 days in Vietnam, and did my duty. And like I said, I wasn't wounded, but I guess I was one of the lucky ones that didn't get wounded. And after 11 months and 8 days, they put us on helicopters. Those of us were getting shipped out to spend our time over there. We went to Saigon, and they had chartered a big old, I won't ever forget, our airplane was a big jet called World Airways, and it was canary yellow. And we left Saigon and went to Tokyo, Japan, and something happened to the jet, something wrong with one of the engines or something, and we had to spend a night in Tokyo. And the next morning, after they worked on it, we left there and we flew across the Pacific Ocean and went to Travis Air Force Base in San Francisco. And so we got off there, and rather than spend the money to go to civilian airlines, I said, well, I'm at the air base here, I'm going to see if I can get a military hop. Well, I got on a big old troop airplane called a C-124, double-decker, piston engine, radial engines on it, and so we headed out, and we was going to Kansas City. And it took so long, and that thing was so hot, till we stopped in Kansas City. Well, I called me a cab, and I got off and got the cab to carry me down to civilian airport, and I hopped on a Southern Airways jetliner going to Jackson, Mississippi. Well, I hadn't let anybody know that I was coming home, kind of like I wanted to be a surprise, you know. So when I got to Jackson, Mississippi, and I walked from the airport out to, back then it was Highway 80, which was a 2-lane highway, and I hitchhiked my hometown, which was Forest, Mississippi. And this guy and this girl that I went to school with, they were out on a date. They come along and picked me up, and they asked me, well, where you coming from? And I said, I just got back from Vietnam. And all they said was, oh, you know. So they took me to the house, and I knocked on my door and woke my mom up. And I thought she was going to pass out because I was standing there looking through the door whenever she opened it. But anyway, that's the extent of my trip to and from Vietnam. And you know, like I said, I've never ran into anybody that rode a ship like I did, and I don't regret it. But we had we'd pull a week of KP, they call it, you know, on that ship down there, and we had to cook for the whole ship, and then somebody else would take our place on that ship, pulling KP. And I won't ever forget, one time we were down in the bottom of the room, in the bottom of the ship, in a place called the crying room, and it was where three guys got in there, and all we did all day long was cut up onion.
That's why they call it the crying room.
So, you know, it wasn't all bad. It wasn't all a bad trip over there in that ship, but, you know, I was lucky enough to get to fly home.
How did you feel, and how did you feel when you got home, and how did people treat you once you got home?
Well, like I said, that guy and that girl picked me up that I went to school with. They asked me where I was coming from, and I said Vietnam. And all they said was, oh. And some of my mom's friends were over, you know, and they didn't really welcome me home. You know, the people, the guys that went to Vietnam, they had the news media and all that gave them a bad reputation. You know, like, oh, we're baby killers and drug addicts and stuff like that. And that's kind of what I felt like when I got home. That I wasn't welcomed home. You know, everybody just kind of say, oh, well, good to see you, you know. It wasn't no surprise to them, you know. And so, you know, I felt I kind of let down, kind of disheartened, you know, that I wasn't welcomed home after being in a war in Vietnam, you know. And it was kind of disheartening. So, but everybody just kind of shunned the subject of Vietnam, you know.
Just didn't talk about it.
Right.
That's something we just don't talk about.
Right. Exactly.
But that's why you're here tonight.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, you're telling everybody about Vietnam and your experience. And
well,
we appreciate that.
I went to Vietnam, and I was, like I said, I was 19 years old when I went to Vietnam, and I wanted to come home a war hero. You know, I wanted to come home a hero and everybody welcomed me home, but it didn't turn out that way. And I thought I'd get some respect, and I didn't realize what war was all about because I was, like I said, I was 19 years old. And I had never really been away from home. I got out of high school, and shortly thereafter I joined the military. So I didn't really realize what war was all about until I got to Vietnam, you know. In other words, I don't think I really grew up until I got to Vietnam. So,
Travis, I appreciate that. We're going to have to take a short break here. Stay tuned, and we're going to come back and talk more with these two Vietnam veterans here on Local Heroes on WKFK TV 7. Welcome back to Local Heroes here on WKFK TV 7. We're talking to Hal and Travis Creel, both Vietnam veterans. Hal, your first combat experience, what was that like?
Well, I've always said that one of the most mature, and I guess the most mature and sobering thing that happened to me was when I went out on my first patrol in Vietnam, and they took 6 of us probably about 20, 25 miles out into the mountains in the Central Highlands, and they set us down on the side of a mountain, and they flew away. And as the choppers went out of hearing distance, we, of course, we always sit there and for about 10 minutes and call in our position and do what you call a sit rep, a situation report, and let them, the people back at base camp, know what's going on. They keep a record of everything. But anyway, we were sitting there, and it was hot, and I was new, first patrol, and I was sitting there and looking. I had all my gear on. I had my rifle at port arms, scared, and I remember thinking to myself, Creel, you better grow up quick. There's nobody but you and these 5 other guys out here in the middle of nowhere to defend yourself, and you better grow up quick. So that was probably the most sober and maturing thing. But as far as my first combat experience, I've always told people that one thing that I was surprised at, totally shocked at, is the power and the sound of what goes on in combat. Whether it be artillery, whether it be helicopters with machine guns, whether it be AK-47s firing or whatever, rockets, mortars. I was shocked at the sound and the power of combat weapons. But my first combat experience was we used to do occasionally, we'd have to do what we called BDAs, which is bomb damage assessment. When they would do an arc light with a B-52, they would run a B-52s at night out of Guam, and they would bomb a certain area, and they would send one of our teams out to that area to hopefully find dead bodies, pick up papers, take uniforms off of dead people, and anything that would identify what unit was in there and what kind of damage was actually done to that unit. And anyway, this particular time, they had done a bombing run the night before, so the first thing this morning, daylight, we were sent to do the BDA. We flew out there, and there was 6 of us. We had to rappel in. Of course, the bombs had cleared a lot of the tree out, but you still couldn't land. So we rappelled in, and which, of course, that takes a couple of minutes or so to do that. And that gives the NVA, which was in this particular instance was NVA in that area. We rappelled in, and as the choppers flew away, we moved probably 20 or 30 yards up a trail that was there, and we stopped to do our situation report. And the patrol leader was calling in our position now, and that particular day I was walking what you call tail end Charlie, which is the last person in the column. And sometimes I'd walk point, sometimes I'd walk that, sometimes you carry the radio, you do different things. But that particular day, I was walking tail end Charlie, and his job is to, of course, walk with the team, but to walk backwards, cover your trail, take a brush, limb and cover your trail, try to cover any footprints or anything like that that keep the VC from being able to follow you. And as we stopped, the other guys were faced this way up the trail, and I was, of course, faced back the trail. And as I stood there, of course, I had my rifle on ready, my M16. I heard a stick break. Well, you know the difference between a twig breaking and a stick breaking, and that alerted me. And there was some clump of bushes about 10 or 15 feet from me. So when I heard that stick break, I just lowered my rifle down by my side, flipped it on safe, and put it on semi-automatic. Sure enough, about 2 or 3 seconds later, there was 3 NVA fully uniformed with AK-47s came around those bushes, and they were side by side. They wasn't back to back, they were side by side. And I didn't have much time. Of course, you don't have but a split second to make a decision. So my decision was I leveled down on the one in the middle. I shot him about 4 or 5 times. I saw him fall backwards. And then before they could react, I flipped it on semi-automatic and I sprayed the other 2, wounding the other 2. And they went to the ground, and 2 of them were dead, and 1 of them wasn't. But one of them kept moving around, and he was basically giving away our position. And so I took a hand grenade and flipped pulled the pin and kind of rolled it down to him and let it go off and finished him off. And we had to sit there for probably about the next 15 or 20 minutes. The NVA were moving through the bushes. I could see them moving through the bushes, and they wasn't over probably 15 feet from us, but they just couldn't see us. They didn't know exactly where we were. And so, but after about 15 or 20 minutes, we were able to move down the side of the mountain and move to an extraction point and get extracted. We didn't, needless to say, we didn't get to do the bomb damage assessment, but that was my first combat experience. And people have asked me before, what's it like being in combat? And I told people that if you spend an extended amount of time in a combat situation, I said I found that you go through 3 stages. First, when you first get there, you're scared, confused, I don't know exactly what to expect. Then after a little time and experience, you get to the point you're a little braver, a little more confident, sometimes almost getting to the point of arrogant, cocky. And then after a few months of seeing what's happened to your friends and losing friends like I did, and seeing what happened to them, after a few months of it, then you get mad. It almost comes to a point of wanting vengeance. But as far as first combat, it's harrowing. It's a scary situation. In fact, you don't know if you did good or didn't, but you just basically, your first time, you just do it off instinct. Thank goodness for your training, and it's just, you just have to work it from that and just work off instinct and training. And it's just something that it's hard, and it's something that's hard that a lot of people had to go through, but you can do it.
Yes, you can. You brought some artifacts. Let's can we take a quick look at a couple of them and tell us what we've got here?
This is a canteen that I took off of an NBA North Vietnamese Army regular that I killed one day when we set an ambush, and we killed a bunch of them. We had encountered probably a company-sized unit that was moving. They looked like they were moving their company because some of them were fully loaded and in regular NVA, and some looked like they were moving a division or a company. You could tell by the things they were moving and had on their back. And this, you can see, of course, it's hard to see. You can see shrapnel holes here where we threw hand grenades, and then some of the shrapnel hit his canteen, and I was able to get that and bring it back with me. But,
now, every Marine out there is going to recognize this.
Yeah.
This device right here.
That's my old K-bar that you used, and we carried it. Everybody carried one, and kept it. Most people carry them right here on their web gear so that they could get to it easy. And of course, it was used for a lot of different things, but I was glad to be able to get it.
And you got your dog tags here, and I see you got some 550 cord on there to keep them quiet.
Yeah, I didn't know if anybody would recognize that or not. We would get these little rubber grommets here and put around them to keep them quiet, because you didn't want anything that made any noise. And
you didn't want that chain on there.
Didn't want that chain on it to shine or to make any noise either. And
you got another artifact here that you brought back.
Yeah, this is off of an NVA soldier that I killed. The same guy.
And what happened on this side?
You can see when he was walking, when we set the ambush, he was walking like this, and as I opened fire on him, of course, that side of the magazine was facing me, and this is where one of my rounds went through, and it came out this side here. And of course, it logged up his magazine, and I was able to get it.
There's another thing we want to talk about that you wore probably the most over there.
Yeah, that was old bandana. When I first got there, I wore a bush hat, and but I found it to be hot and come off your head some.
Bush hat, boonie hat.
Boonie hat, and I wore this for a while, and then I graduated to the old bandana, which was a lot cooler, and of course it gave me some camouflage too. But this is, I was glad to be able to bring some of this back, and this is something I can pass on to my grandsons.
Yes, yes.
And,
well, gentlemen, I can't thank you enough for being on this show. I tell you, the Vietnam veteran is probably one of the most misunderstood, misappreciated veteran out there. And I can't thank you enough, and I can't say welcome home enough to both of you. I really do appreciate your service. All Vietnam veterans are heroes in my book. Of course, all veterans are heroes, but the Vietnam veteran, like I said, is probably one of the most misunderstood veterans out there, and I can't thank you both enough. So, Travis, thank you so much. Hal,
thank you.
I admire both of you very much.
Appreciate you having us.
I appreciate the honor.
I'm so glad for you to be here. It was an honor for me to talk to you. That'll do it for this edition of Local Heroes. Please stay tuned next week for another exciting Veterans History story here on WKFK TV7 and Local Heroes from the GI Museum in Goshen, Mississippi.